Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're talking about Millard Filmore.
That's right, Johnny. You pretty much got his name as correct as anybody else's. It's Millard Filmore, our lucky number 13th president, who is an accidental president, who is the catalyst for the events that ruin a nation. So,
Excellent. This guy sounds awesome. Never heard of him.
Yeah. To be fair, with the modern Common Core education system, he apparently is not even talked about in American history. They talk about some of the things
sounds like
around
he didn't do anything significant, so who cares?
Some of the things around his life, but they don't talk about, like, they don't expect anybody in school to remember his name anymore, I guess.
I mean, it's a memorable name, though. Like, it's one of the easier ones to remember.
Although, with that said, he's also not the least forgotten president. 60% of the people, when given the name, can identify him as a president. Yeah. Although they almost all fail if you give them a multiple choice, like, which one of the following is a president? Millard Filmore, Alexander Hamilton, or Benjamin Franklin? The majority of Americans will get that question wrong.
Everybody thinks that Hamilton and Franklin were president. Franklin especially.
People
really shipped him into being a president.
When he wasn't. No. Anyways, Johnny, let's get into it. Fillmore takes office after the sudden potential assassination of Taylor. Now, remember from our last president episode, Taylor dies under mysterious circumstances after attending a 4th of July party and potentially consuming too many cherries, resulting in arsenic poisoning. Potentially. Or potentially, that was an assassination. Because Taylor was very much outspoken. He's as close to an abolitionist up to that point as you can get, which is a little ironic because Taylor was also a slave owner. So it was like, slaves for me, but not for thee. Yeah, kind of.
Rules for thee, but not for me. That's always been the case for politicians. Like, that's literally what they run on.
Yes, and so Taylor was very, very much with the expansion into the new colonies. We have once the Mexican-American War is over, we get New Mexico territories, all of California, that huge middle chunk basically between Texas and California. And there's a big question: what do we want to do with that? Taylor, surprisingly, again, even though being a slave owner, said no slavery in those new territories. California is to be admitted as a free state. There will be no compromise. I will not sign any bill that says it otherwise. Slavery ends where it's at. Territories are free. California's a free state.
Is that like a pulse of the nation type thing where he was getting a kind of a feeling that people didn't want it to expand? Or was this someone lining his pockets, or do we not know?
I think it's more of he recognized it as a moral wrong, and if we're going to continue in a modern day and age, we're going to have to kind of address this slavery thing, and what better way to do it than just...
Because this is the rest of the world phasing it out. You know, the rest of the white world is phasing it out, and he's starting to realize that it's going that way. So
stop it where it's at. There's your
having more of a conflict later. Yeah.
The compromise essentially is slavery is still legal in the states where it's legal, but it's not going to expand. That's kind of Taylor's, in a nutshell, stance. Now, Millard Filmore, good old Millard, see, he was also a member of the Whig Party, and was specifically chosen to be the vice president to Taylor because he had no opinions on anything of his own. He was a middle-of-the-road, a good-looking dude who was a congressman, who nobody remembered him being a congressman because he never stood out other than being a sort of a good-looking dude. And that was it.
Sometimes.
And so the Whig Party specifically we want somebody who's not offensive so that way Taylor can get the New York vote and some of the Southern votes. And the only way we're going to do that is if we have a dude who's not an abolitionist and is not overtly against slavery.
You just have vanilla yogurt. And
what better guy than
that's what you get.
Vanilla yogurt. So obviously the Southern Democrats are not very happy with Taylor's position on not willing to compromise, and so when Taylor dies, all of a sudden now you have Millard Filmore. Who comes in.
Well, if he doesn't have an opinion, that's a good thing, right? Because now they can kind of try to sway him one way or another. He's a battleground now.
Yes. Taylor and Millard didn't even meet before Millard becomes the VP. Like, they never met. They don't know each other. They have no... It seems odd.
What a weird time I mean, but it seems odd until you consider how hard it would have been to meet somebody who didn't live near you.
Yes.
Although if he was a congressman,
you'd think they would have, because they both
at some point,
should have. But in any case, when Taylor dies, Millard becomes the first non-slave owning president since the Adamses. They were the first two, and then so he's the third non-slave owning. Millard himself actually comes from a very, very poor family. He was literate,
that's why he didn't have slaves.
Yeah,
It's not a moral choice. It was a financial decision.
In fact, he was literate, but the only book he had up until his 17th birthday was the Bible, so that was all he was reading. And then when he turned 17, his next book of choice was a dictionary, so that he can improve his vocabulary. Once he becomes a lawyer, he starts buying his own, increasing out his own library. And it's actually one of the first puts a library in the White House. So nobody else did before him, but he puts a library because he's very much about reading and becoming self-educated. With that said, he does marry his teacher, who is 2 years his senior. So
2 years.
Yeah, just 2 years. Yeah, his senior year.
That's not. So what? Like, what is that? That's not a problem.
It's still a little ethically questionable when it comes to positions of authority, that kind of stuff. But anyways, marries her. Once he becomes accidentally the president, not elected, nobody wanted this dude, but he becomes the president and instantly says, hey, that compromise that we're all been trying to do since 1849? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to support it. Whatever we decide to come up with, I will sign on the dotted line for a compromise. And Johnny, this is it. I've got nothing else bad to talk about.
Compromise, and he's like, yes, compromise, that's a good thing. I read it in the dictionary. Let's do that. I will sign that.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't know what it says or what it means or anything else, but yeah.
I want to compromise. There's not a lot in his personal life really worth talking about. He's just vanilla ice cream. But the compromise of 1850 destroys the country. It is not a compromise. It is not something that brought us together to stave off hostilities. It pretty much
just about any other political movement, it was named compromise because it was exactly not that.
Exactly. So,
like anytime you see the word freedom in some sort of act or something, they're taking somebody's rights away.
So if you're wondering what was the compromise, there were 5 laws passed in 1850 that are considered the Great Compromise of 1850 that thrust the USA pretty much into an open civil war a decade later. These are direct A to B kind of things. First,
this is what kicked it off. They lit the fuse here.
This is lighting the fuse, yes. So the number one, it admits California as a free state and bans the slave trade in D.C., although slavery is still legal in D.C. You just cannot buy and sell slaves anymore in D.C.
So, you got to go outside the city limits, get that stuff down the road 15 minutes.
Yeah, so that's the abolition side. That's your anti-slavery side of this compromise deal. The rest of them, not so much. It defines the northern and western boundaries of Texas and establishes the territory of New Mexico with no restrictions, free or slave. Establishes the Utah. Establishes the Utah territory, again, no restrictions, free or slave. So these territories
not a state. We weren't talking about territories here. We're talking about the states in the union, which California state, no slaves.
It does not at all address what is now Kansas or Nebraska. It doesn't address that territories at all.
A little plains area.
So we just ignore the plains, get rid of them.
Well, I feel like that's carried over. I never think about the plains.
But Johnny, this is the catalyst. This is the nail on the head. This is the icing on the cake. The femme de la resistance. The really awful shit, which anybody with the right mind should have vetoed the fuck out of this, but they didn't. Which again, Taylor was going to veto it, but they don't.
I'm a sign whatever.
Fugitive slave laws, Johnny, have already been in place, basically essentially saying that if a slave runs to a free state, there are grounds in place for that state to go and collect said slave and bring the property back home. They get redefined, though, with this compromise. Now, every state government is not only responsible for returning the slaves back to areas of origins, every police officer, military personnel, and civilian is obligated under law to return anybody suspected of being a slave back to their former slave owners. There is no habeas corpus. So what basically means is that if somebody, all they have to do is write up a proclamation that says this person, I own them, and they ran away, they must now be returned to me, regardless of whether they were ever a slave or not, regardless of whatever paperwork they do or do not have. It is guilty till proven innocent, which is guilty because they're required to kick them back down to the South. And once they're in the South, you're never getting them back.
But, all right, but here's the thing, Tommy. Back in the day, when America was great, I assume, it started at least at some point, people were honest. Nobody lied. Nobody made stuff up.
Yeah.
How much were the civilians getting paid to track down and return?
Not a dime. It's basically so anybody
who's... So do your own damn job, government. I'm not doing... Yeah. It's like if a cop on a foot chase in my front yard and tells me to go catch the guy. No! You do more cardio, bud. I'm not doing your job for you.
But Johnny, if let's say you are friendly with your neighbor who happens to be a free man of color, and you do not turn him in for being a runaway slave, despite the fact that he wasn't a runaway slave, you can actually go to jail for aiding and abetting a runaway slave who wasn't really a runaway slave.
Thank goodness for me. I'm not friendly with anybody, so
thoroughly
me and my core here.
Pissed off the northern states. They said, hey, states' rights. Yeah, I'm a free state. I should have the right to not enforce your bullshit slavery crap if I don't want slavery in my state.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have to deal with it.
Maybe don't make my civilians do your job. Like, if this is such an important thing, hire a division, pay them, have them go do it. Like,
protests instantly erupt. It pushes the movement of the abolitionist group into becoming very, very much hostile. And when Kansas-Nebraska Act, which, by the way, this whole compromise is ignored a minute later when the Kansas-Nebraska Act comes into place, which is not underneath Filmore's jurisdiction. But when it does come into place, it says the state gets, the territories get to choose whether they're free or slave. And so a bunch of slaves run there and a bunch of free, people run there, and they get violent. The first shots of the Civil War essentially are fired in Kansas.
I think we talked about this.
We've touched on this
up
before
to the
in other
Civil
episodes.
War, right? Where that's a big thing. Yeah.
And this all stems from the ridiculous expansion of the fugitive slave laws and what that entails. The abolition movement.
Seems like the real bad part of this whole conference. Like everything else, it's like, all right,
whatever.
Okay,
but that's the bad part. And it opened up hostility. The abolition movement, there's groups of them that become violent, and rightfully so. They're now at this point where they're criminals anyways. Fuck it.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's and just like everything else, when eventually war comes from it, there's peaceful protests and there's people that are writing letters and stuff, and then eventually you got to burn a city block down to get your point across.
And there are legitimate. There's a book, 12 Years a Slave. Dude's a free man. Was an educated free man. He was a musician, and somebody said he was a slave, and he spent the next 12 years as a slave, despite the fact that he was a freeman.
Had he ever been?
No, he was a freeman. Like he was not.
Well, right, but not one who had earned or bought or escaped to freedom.
No, he was a freeman.
Was born. There were just free.
There are a handful of free men that were born in the North, free. That cut the color of their skin.
Not anymore. Sorry. God, what a nightmare existing and walking around just waiting for somebody to call you out on. That's my slave or that's somebody else's, and I'm going to send you away.
And this all kicks off because one accidental president who didn't have his own backbone to do anything or his own opinions to do anything was like, I'll just sign whatever. Signs a bill that should never have been passed, ever. Should have been challenged in the Supreme Court, but frankly, wasn't. And
it was also not elected.
Not elected,
which is important to note, I think. And I assume he was then not reelected.
No, he was not reelected. In fact, it was so bad that not only was he not reelected, the Whig Party is no more after.
He was just he's into the line for the Whig Party.
The Whig Party, and then it pretty much sets us up with. There are some slight exceptions, but from a presidential standpoint, it sets us up with the last person to not be a Republican or Democrat ever.
So He kind of threw us into that whole two-party system where it's just we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean there are elections.
Sure, third parties coming up with more votes than they're getting now. I'm sure. But
we're done.
Essentially,
we are locked into which it's always been for the most part a two-party system, but it really gets locked into what is Republican and what is Democrat. Although
instead of another the Whig Party, for example, coming in and being one of the two or whatever whatever other. I don't know what parties there were. Probably lots.
So, if you're wanting somebody to blame for the current political system, good old Millard.
Yeah.
Now,
blame the dead guy.
The aftermath.
He's
Johnny,
dead, right?
Yeah, he's dead. Obviously not reelected. Within a few months of leaving office, unfortunately for him, his wife and his daughter will both pass away. His wife.
Oh, fuck.
His daughter dies of cholera. I don't remember what his wife died of, like pneumonia or something along those lines. Something along those lines, but yeah, his daughter died of cholera. So,
well, shit,
sucks.
You ruin the country, and then your two closest family members die.
Son lived though, so that's not completely alone. Cool. So thanks, Millard.
Yeah, sorry. Also. That's it for this week in Historic Hindsight. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and join us next week when we talk about the Iranian hostage crisis.